For 5 years, Emily Davis raised the twin girls with all the love she could give, never knowing who their father was, only that he was someone her best friend, Rebecca Johnson, kept distant. One morning, he showed up at her door after realizing he had 2 daughters far away. "Hello, family. Welcome to Tales by Eve. Please subscribe and give us a like. It really means a lot. Also, share this video with your friends and family, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thank you for doing so. Sit back and enjoy as we dive into the story." Emily Davis stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, smoothing the fabric of her ivory anniversary dress. The soft afternoon sunlight peeked through the curtains of her apartment, casting a golden glow across the space she and James Anderson had made their own. Laughter came from the kitchen, where James was struggling to open a bottle of champagne, as he often did. Emily smiled quietly to herself. 1 year of marriage. It still felt surreal. They had met at a charity event 3 years ago. He was a trauma surgeon, and she was a graphic designer volunteering for a cancer awareness campaign. He was witty and unexpectedly kind. She was shy, artistic, yet somehow magnetic in a quiet way. Their connection was instant and undeniable. Even now, a year after their wedding, Emily felt the same flutter in her chest when he entered the room. That evening, they made a toast to love, to resilience, and to the future. They talked about having children, 2, maybe 3, James had said, and about traveling and growing old together. They danced barefoot in the living room, with Sinatra playing softly in the background. But that would become the last joyful memory she held of him. The next morning, James left early for a shift at the hospital, promising to return for dinner. Emily kissed him goodbye at the door, barefoot, holding her cup of coffee, still smiling from their perfect night. By the time dusk arrived, the sun had set behind the skyline, and the candles she had lit flickered low. But James hadn't come home. Her phone rang. When she heard the words "accident" and "I'm sorry," the cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the kitchen tiles. The sound echoed in her ears like a scream. The officer's voice blurred into static. She couldn't feel her legs. Her world, once so full, collapsed into a heavy silence. The days that followed were a blur. People she barely knew came and went from the apartment, offering casseroles and condolences. She heard the words "young widow" whispered too many times. Emily couldn't cry. Not at first. She just stared. She spent Saturday walking in circles, the place that had once been full of laughter now echoing with nothing but her hollow footsteps. She packed away James' clothes one by one, clinging to the scent of his cologne on his shirts. His toothbrush stayed in the holder, his jacket draped over the couch. She couldn't erase the remnants of his life. People told her she was strong, but she didn't feel strong. She felt broken in ways she hadn't known existed. Emily People told her she was strong, but she didn't feel strong. She felt broken in ways she never knew possible. 2 months passed. Grief settled in like a thick fog, constant and suffocating. Emily had learned how to carry it, like a coat, heavy and invisible. She spoke little, living on autopilot. Then, one night, her phone rang again. Rebecca Johnson, her best friend, her sister in every way but blood. Rebecca's voice crackled through the receiver. "It's happening. It's too early. I'm bleeding. Something's wrong." Emily's heart stopped. "Where are you?" "I'm at home. I tried to drive myself, but I'm scared." Without thinking, Emily grabbed her keys and rushed out into the night. The hospital lights were too bright, too cold. Emily held Rebecca's hand as contractions overtook her, both of them in tears. Doctors and nurses bustled around them, but all Emily could focus on was Rebecca's panic and her voice, shaking with fear. "If I don't make it, please, promise me you'll take care of them, my babies." Emily's breath caught in her chest. "Don't say that. You're going to be okay. Promise me." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "You're going to hold them soon. You'll be fine." Rebecca gave a shaky nod, squeezing Emily's hand. The babies were born shortly after, twin girls, small and pink, with cries so strong they echoed through the maternity ward. But Rebecca never opened her eyes again. Emily sat in the hospital nursery, staring at the incubators where the twins slept peacefully, unaware of the heartbreak surrounding them. Her hands shook. How could life be so unfair? Twice in 2 months. She wept for Rebecca, for James, for the life she had lost, and the life she now had to take care of. No family members came for the twins. Rebecca had never revealed the identity of their father. In fact, she'd always been vague about the pregnancy, saying, "It's better if he doesn't know." Now, it was just Emily Davis. The twins had no one else. As the nurses began filling out paperwork and the social worker asked gentle questions, Emily said with resolve, "I'll take them. I promised." And just like that, she became a mother of two. Back at the apartment, Emily stood in the nursery she and James had designed but never used. It was meant to be for their child. Now, Madison and Sophia lay in two small bassinets, swaddled and asleep. Emily pulled a chair between them and sat still in her hospital clothes, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered, "but I'm going to try. I'm going to love you the way she would have wanted, the way I promised." Outside, the city moved on. Cars honked, trains roared, people laughed. But inside the apartment, a new story had quietly begun. One of heartbreak, yes, but also of fierce love and quiet resilience. The morning after bringing the twins home, Emily awoke to the sharp cries of two newborns echoing through the apartment. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming until the weight of reality dropped on her chest like a stone. James was gone. Rebecca was gone. But the promise she made was still here. Alive, crying, needing her. She rolled out of bed, her muscles aching, her eyes still swollen from the tears of the last few days. The apartment, once quiet and somber, now vibrated with new life. Madison was fussing. Sophia's tiny face was scrunched in protest. Emily reached down, lifting them one by one with practiced awkwardness. She hadn't read parenting books. She hadn't prepared for motherhood. There had been no baby shower, no gentle transition, but she held them as if they were always meant to be there. The first few weeks were tough. Emily quickly learned the rhythms of newborn care. Feedings every 2 hours, diapers that seemed endless, unpredictable crying spells that stretched into the night. She existed in sweatpants, hair tangled, barely eating. Her world revolved entirely around these two tiny, helpless girls. She made mistakes. She panicked the first time one of them ran a slight fever. She cried when she couldn't get them both to sleep at once. But every mistake was met with determination. Emily had faced death. She had lived through heartbreak. She could survive this, too. Little by little, a routine began to form. She learned the difference between Madison's hungry cry and Sophia's tired one. She discovered that classical music calmed them during tummy time and that holding both at once, one in a sling and the other against her chest, was the only way to soothe them on some nights. Emily slowly turned James' old study into a nursery. She painted it in soft pastels, lavender and cream, trying to bring warmth to a space that had once held textbooks and surgical journals. Photos of Rebecca found their place on the shelves, next to stuffed animals and baby books. It was her way of keeping Rebecca with them. Her grief hadn't disappeared. It had simply evolved. There were still nights when she collapsed into bed, James' sweatshirt clutched to her chest, sobbing into the fabric. But the sound of a baby's cry would always pull her upright. Her sorrow would be interrupted by duty, and she would rise to care for the girls. Eventually, Emily Davis began to love again. She would wipe away her tears, pick up one of the twins, and whisper softly, "I'm still here. I've got you." It didn't take long for the hospital social workers to follow up. Rebecca's file showed no next of kin, no will, no paternity declaration. The state needed someone to take legal responsibility for the twins. Emily didn't hesitate. "I want to adopt them," she told the caseworker firmly. The process was complex and invasive. Court hearings, background checks, home visits. But Emily handled it all with quiet strength. She was honest. She told the judge that Rebecca had asked her to take the girls if anything ever happened to her, that there was no father in the picture, that she had loved Rebecca like a sister, and now she loved Madison and Sophia like daughters. A few weeks later, Emily walked out of the courthouse with trembling hands and an official decree. She was their mother. Despite the forward momentum in her life, one question continued to haunt Emily. Who was the twins' father? She remembered how Rebecca had always avoided the topic, how she had simply said, I want to protect them from him. That's all. No name, no photo, no explanation. Emily occasionally wondered if she had a right to know, not for herself, but for the girls. What if they grew up needing medical history? What if he came looking for them one day? But every time she thought about asking, she stopped. Rebecca had trusted her with the girls. That trust came with boundaries. Emily chose to respect that for now. In time, Emily began freelancing from home. During nap times, she worked on design contracts to pay the bills. The apartment, once silent and full of James' voice, now buzzed with the sound of babbling twins, lullabies, and late-night cartoons. Emily created photo albums to capture every moment. First baths, first smiles, their first Halloween in matching ladybug costumes. Each page was a tribute not just to the twins, but to Rebecca's memory, to a love that didn't die but transformed. Neighbors and friends often told her, "You're doing so well, Emily." But what they didn't see were the quiet nights, the loneliness that crept in after the girls fell asleep, the ache in her chest when she imagined James beside her, watching their adopted daughters grow, or Rebecca laughing on the couch with them. But Emily didn't crumble. She didn't retreat. She had two hearts beating outside her body now, and in them, she found meaning again. By the time Madison and Sophia turned 5, they were full of questions and giggles. Madison loved to paint, just like Emily. Sophia adored books and puzzles. They were different in temperament, but alike in one important way. They were loved. Every birthday was marked with a cake, a story about Aunt Rebecca, and a promise that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Emily Davis, once broken by loss, had rebuilt herself through motherhood. She wasn't the same woman James had married, nor the woman who had held Rebecca's hand in the hospital. She had become stronger, softer, fiercer, a mother by promise and by choice. The skyline of New York City glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of William Will Harrison's penthouse. Everything about his life screamed success: corner office, tailored suits, exclusive investor dinners. Yet, as he stood in his office late one evening, surrounded by silence and sterile luxury, he felt nothing. The man who had once chased dreams with a fire in his chest now sat at the top of the tech industry. But there was a hollow echo inside. Will was 35, a CEO, a millionaire many times over. Yet some nights, he couldn't sleep. Not from stress or stock prices, but because of her, Rebecca. The name still stirred something sharp in his chest. It had been nearly 6 years since he had last seen her. Their relationship had been passionate, messy, and fleeting. She had loved deeply, lived loudly, and refused to fit into his world of constant meetings and delayed plans. When she told him she was pregnant, he panicked. Not because he didn't love her, but because he wasn't ready. He had said the wrong things, chosen the wrong words, and hurt her more than he realized. Then she disappeared. She changed her number, moved cities, ignored his emails. At first, he looked for her, even hired someone briefly, but his startup was on the verge of either exploding or imploding. He told himself that she didn't want to be found, that maybe she had lost the baby or chosen someone else, that she didn't want him in her life. But the guilt never left. That night, Will sat in his study, staring at an old photo. It had fallen out of a book he hadn't touched in years. In the picture, Rebecca was smiling up at the camera, her hair blowing in the wind, one hand raised as if caught in mid-laughter. It felt like a punch to the gut. He realized then that he needed answers. Closure. He needed to know what had happened to her, to the babies, to the life they almost had. Will picked up the phone and called a private investigator he had worked with years ago. "I'm looking for someone," Will said, his voice quiet but firm. "Her name is Rebecca Johnson. We were close. I haven't seen her in years. I need to find her." The investigator, a seasoned professional named David Miller, began digging. Old phone records, apartment leases, medical logs. The trail was faint, but it hadn't gone completely cold. 3 weeks later, David called. "I found her." Will stood by the window, his heart pounding. "Where is she?" There was a pause on the line. "I'm sorry, Will. She passed away 5 years ago. Complications from childbirth." Will's body went rigid. The words didn't make sense. "What? No, that can't be right. I verified it. She was living in Chicago. She checked into a hospital alone, gave birth to twins, but she didn't make it." Will sank onto the armrest of his chair, stunned. "Twins?" David's voice softened. "There's more. I found something you need to hear." David continued, his tone turning serious. When I learned she'd given birth, I tracked down where the children ended up. I assumed they were in foster care, but it turns out someone adopted them right away, a woman named Emily Davis. Rebecca's best friend. Will didn't speak. His mind was spinning. David pressed on. I did a private paternity DNA test. It's unconventional, but legal. I compared your DNA. Remember that old background screening for your company? I had access to that sample, and I matched it against one of the twins' profiles. Silence. They're yours, Will. Both girls. Time seemed to slow. Will gripped the phone tighter, barely able to breathe. You're absolutely sure? Yes. 99.9%. You're their biological father. Will dropped the phone. He fell to his knees on the cold hardwood floor, hands trembling, eyes wide, his breath shallow. He had daughters, 5-year-old twins, and he hadn't known. He hadn't been there. Rebecca was gone, but his children, they were alive. For the next hour, Will didn't move. His thoughts raced. What had Rebecca gone through? Pregnant, scared, alone. Had she wanted him there and changed her mind? Or had she truly believed he wouldn't care? Why hadn't she told him the truth? More importantly, what now? He didn't know the first thing about being a father. He wasn't even sure if he had the right to show up in these girls' lives after all this time. What if they didn't want to know him? What if the woman who had raised them hated him? Still, one thing became clear. He had to see them. Not to control them, not to take them away, but just to know them. To try. For the first time in years, Will felt something close to purpose stirring in his chest. David gave him everything: addresses, court records, photos. Emily Davis had legally adopted the girls shortly after Rebecca's death. She lived in a penthouse in downtown Chicago, the same one she had shared with her late husband. The girls were thriving. Will spent a week studying every detail of their lives from afar: school attendance records, social media photos, daycare evaluations. Madison and Sophia had Rebecca's smile, his eyes, and Emily. She wasn't just a placeholder guardian. She was a mother. Will felt conflicted, torn between wanting to meet them and fearing he would shatter what they had. But he knew what Rebecca would want now. Not vengeance, not silence, but presence. Instead of approaching Emily directly, Will asked David to reach out on his behalf, carefully and respectfully. He wrote a letter. Not demanding, not emotional, just sincere. I'm not here to disrupt your life. I just learned the truth, and I need to meet them. Not to take them away, but to say I'm sorry and to find a place in their world, if you'll let me. A part of him feared Emily would never reply. But a week later, she did. Her answer was cautious, guarded, but open. You can meet them, but not as their father. Not yet. As a friend. They don't know, and I won't confuse them. If you want to be in their lives, you'll have to earn it gently. Will smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. It was a crisp Saturday morning in late spring, when Will Harrison stood outside a modest but elegant building in downtown Chicago. His heart was pounding harder than it ever had during boardroom pitches or big deals. He clutched a small stuffed bunny in one hand, a gift he'd carefully chosen after learning from David that Madison adored animals. Sophia, on the other hand, was obsessed with fairy tales, especially stories about castles and dragons. Will carried a children's storybook for her, wrapped in soft green paper. He was a man who had once closed million-dollar deals with ease. But now, as he approached the intercom and pressed the button labeled Davis, his palms were slick with sweat. The door buzzed open, and Emily greeted him in the hallway. She looked different from the photo David had shown him. More tired, perhaps, but still radiant in an effortless way. She wore a casual sweater and jeans, her hair pulled up, eyes cautious but calm. She didn't offer a smile, just a quiet nod. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Will replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Emily opened the door wider. "They're in the living room. I told them a friend was coming by." Will stepped inside. The apartment was warm and full of life. Crayon drawings covered the fridge. Books were scattered across the coffee table, and the faint sound of children's laughter drifted in from the next room. The walls that once held Emily's heartbreak now pulsed with comfort. With home. Madison appeared first. She peeked around the corner with wide eyes, her curls bouncing as she tilted her head. Sophia followed, a little more shy, clutching a worn plush dragon in her small hands. Emily crouched between them. "Girls, this is Will. He's a friend of Aunt Rebecca's. He wanted to meet you." Madison stepped forward boldly. "Did you know Mommy Rebecca when she was alive?" Will knelt slowly to their level, his throat tightening. Yes, I knew her a long time ago. She was very special to me. Sophia studied him, then asked, did she give you her dragon cookies, too? The ones with the jelly? Will let out a quiet laugh. No, but I wish she had. I love cookies. The girls giggled. Madison took the bunny from his hand without asking. This is cute. That's for you, Will said. Sophia tugged at the green-wrapped book. And this is for you. It's got dragons and a brave girl who saves her kingdom. Sophia's eyes lit up. Madison giggled. Emily watched quietly from the couch, surprised by how quickly they warmed to him. But she didn't relax, not yet. She'd promised herself she would protect them first, understand him second. Will didn't rush. He came by once a week, always on Saturdays, always with something thoughtful. Sometimes it was a puzzle, sometimes a small Lego set, sometimes just time spent reading aloud or helping them build pillow forts. He never stayed too long, never overstepped. He waited for them to invite him into their world. And they did. Within a few weeks, he was Mr. Will. By the third month, Sophia called him Ethan when she was sleepy, and Madison began showing him her drawings before anyone else. Still, Will never claimed more than he was given. He didn't mention the word dad. He didn't demand answers or affection. He was just there. Emily couldn't help but watch him closely. She expected resentment, a sense of entitlement, a push to take control. After all, he was rich, successful, and completely absent for 5 years. But instead, Will was quiet, thoughtful, patient. He asked about routines, school schedules, favorite snacks. He praised Emily for how well the girls were doing, not out of flattery, but with genuine awe. I don't know how you did it, he told her one evening after the girls had fallen asleep on the couch. I wouldn't have known where to begin. Emily sipped her tea and answered without looking at him. I didn't either. I just kept showing up. That night, he helped her carry Madison to bed. Emily stood in the doorway, watching as he pulled the blanket up over her and gently brushed a curl off her forehead. Something in her chest tightened. A week later, Emily sat on the balcony alone, the city skyline twinkling like a blanket of stars. Will joined her, handing her a glass of wine. She hesitated but took it. I still don't understand why she never told me, he said softly. I would have tried to be there. Emily looked down. Rebecca didn't think you'd want them. She didn't hate you. She just didn't trust the version of you she last saw. Will nodded slowly. That version of me wouldn't have been a good father. He paused, then looked at her. I want to be one now. Emily studied him. The rawness in his eyes surprised her. This wasn't guilt masquerading as affection. This was a man waking up. Yes, but sincere. They don't need saving, Emily said. They're okay. We're okay. I know, Will replied. But I don't want to miss another year of their lives. Over the next few months, their rhythm evolved. Will became a fixture, school plays, parent-teacher meetings, doctor's appointments. When Emily was swamped with deadlines, he brought groceries without asking. He fixed the leaky faucet. He stayed late to help with Madison's diorama. They laughed sometimes, argued too about boundaries, screen time, and bedtime routines. But the tension never lasted long. Their lives, once separate, were beginning to braid together, not with fireworks, but with the steady warmth of something real. One afternoon, Madison sat beside Emily while she folded laundry. Mommy, is Mr. Will like our extra dad? Emily froze. Why do you ask? He hugs us like daddies do. And he gets nervous when we sing. Like he's proud. Emily's throat tightened. Sophia entered the room, dragging her dragon toy. He smells like cinnamon, she added. The two girls giggled. Emily smiled faintly. He's someone who loves you very much, and I think he always will. That night, Emily stood in the nursery alone, looking at a photo of Rebecca that sat on the dresser. The twins were asleep, breathing softly, moonlight brushing their cheeks. I kept my promise, Emily whispered. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it with everything I had. She looked over her shoulder, where Will had just set down his briefcase near the door. And I think maybe we all deserved a second chance. Summer arrived slowly in Chicago that year. The long, golden evenings stretched over the city like a gentle wave. In Emily's apartment, time no longer moved with the heavy weight of grief, but with the soft momentum of growth. Things had changed. Will wasn't just a visitor anymore. He had become part of their routine and, unknowingly, part of their hearts. What started as Saturday visits had turned into weekdays, too. School pickups when Emily had work meetings, weekend pancake breakfasts, and spontaneous trips to the park. The girls didn't call him Mr. Will anymore. One day, Madison accidentally called him Papa, then paused with wide eyes. Sophia looked at him and repeated it on purpose, as if testing the waters. Will froze. Emily watched from the kitchen, her hands trembling as she held a dish towel. He knelt down to their level and said, "You can call me whatever feels right. I'll always be here, no matter what." They never stopped calling him Papa after that. To the outside world, they looked like any modern family. Emily, the strong, creative single mother. Will, the involved co-parent. Madison and Sophia, joyful and full of energy. But within the walls of their home, something deeper was happening. Will had stepped into his role not with declarations or demands, but with devotion. He knew their morning routines, their favorite bedtime stories, how Madison hated socks, and how Sophia had to sleep with her dragon every night or she couldn't rest. Will and Emily didn't talk about titles. There were no labels, but their connection had changed, too. Late one evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, Emily and Will sat on the balcony watching the city lights shimmer in silence. Emily finally spoke. "You know, I used to think healing came in big moments, like some dramatic breakthrough, but it's not that. She looked down at her cup of tea. "It's the quiet mornings when the girls don't cry. It's folding laundry and realizing I smiled today without thinking." Will nodded slowly. "For me, it was when Madison asked if I'd be at her art show. I said yes, and she didn't look surprised, just happy, like it was expected." "That's how you know," Emily said softly. "You've become their normal." Will turned to her. "And you've become mine." The moment hung between them, fragile and sacred. They didn't touch, but a wall quietly crumbled. Rebecca's name was never far from their thoughts. Her photo still sat on the mantel, her favorite coffee mug still in the cabinet. Emily made sure the twins knew her, not as a mystery, but as a woman full of laughter and strength. One evening, Will asked, what was she like at the end? Emily paused, her eyes softening. Brave. So brave. Even when she was scared, she thought of them first. She looked at Will. "She loved you. That's why she kept you away. You weren't ready then, and she was afraid the heartbreak would pass to the girls." Will lowered his gaze. "I wish I could tell her I'm not that man anymore." "She knows," Emily said. "I think she sent them to you when you were finally ready." Of course, there were bumps in the road. One evening, Madison had one night. Sophia had a nightmare and called out for Mama. Emily rushed in, held her, and soothed her back to sleep. The next morning, Will looked tired. "I heard her crying last night," he said quietly. Emily hesitated. "I thought about calling you in, but she clung to me, and I didn't want to confuse her in the moment." He nodded. "I understand." But he didn't meet her eyes. Later that week, Sophia fell on the playground and scraped her knee. As Emily rushed over, she noticed Will already holding Sophia tight, whispering to her, wiping her tears before Emily could even get there. They were co-parenting without the paperwork, without the big conversations. It was just happening day by day. They were becoming a family. The girls started kindergarten in August. On the first day, they each held one adult's hand. Sophia held Will's. Madison clung to Emily's. Photos were taken. Hugs were shared. As the school doors closed behind them, Emily looked at Will, eyes glassy. "I thought I'd feel alone on this day," she said. Will smiled gently. "You're not." That evening, they had pizza on the living room floor to celebrate big girls' school, and the girls fell asleep in a heap of blankets and giggles. Will stayed to help clean up. When Emily reached to take a slice of leftover pizza from his hand, their fingers brushed. They paused. Her heart skipped. He looked at her, not with hunger, but with something deeper, respect, tenderness, gratitude. "You've done everything for them," Will said. "You could have turned me away, and you didn't. I'll never stop being grateful for that." Emily's throat tightened. "You showed up. That's all I ever wanted for them." "For me." A long silence passed. Then Will said, almost inaudibly, "Maybe you were sent to me too." As the days passed, healing wasn't a dramatic transformation. It was small, subtle. It was Will helping Sophia with her fear of thunder. It was Emily and Will cooking dinner together while the girls danced to old records. It was family game nights, story times, blanket forts, school projects, laughter in the kitchen. It was the way Will started keeping a toothbrush in the guest bathroom, and the way Emily started looking forward to hearing his key turn in the lock. The grief didn't vanish, but love had crept in, not to replace what was lost, but to build something new in its shadow. One Sunday morning, after brunch and sidewalk chalk drawings, Will packed up to leave. Madison hugged him tightly. "You're coming back tomorrow, right?" Will smiled. "Of course I am." As he opened the door, Emily followed. "Hey," she said. He turned. She hesitated, then reached out and gently fixed the collar of his jacket. It was a small gesture, intimate in its simplicity. "Thank you for not giving up," she said. Will met her eyes. "Thank you for letting me in." And then, for the first time, not rushed, not impulsive, but full of clarity, he leaned in and kissed her cheek. Soft, gentle, like a question more than an answer. Emily didn't move away. She smiled. It wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the middle of one. Winter arrived in Chicago like a quiet hush, blanketing the city in soft snow and silver light. The streets sparkled with Christmas lights. The lights twinkled, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon. For Emily, it was the 5th Christmas without James. For Will, the 6th without Rebecca. And for the twins, it was their first Christmas with a father they knew loved them. But this year felt different. This year, they weren't broken. They were becoming whole. The apartment was transformed into a winter wonderland. Emily and the girls had always decorated together, stringing lights, making clumsy paper snowflakes, and placing ornaments on the slightly too tall artificial tree James had once picked out. But this time, Will was part of it. He arrived with 3 boxes of vintage ornaments, a mix of his mother's, Rebecca's favorites he had kept, and a few he picked out just for the girls. "I thought we could make some new traditions," he said quietly. Madison gasped when she saw the crystal snowflake. "This one looks like magic." "It was Rebecca's," Will said gently. "She used to say it looked like it came from a fairy tale." Sophia reached for a round ornament painted like a dragon and squealed, "This one's mine." They giggled as they hung each piece, while lifting the girls so they could reach higher branches. Emily snapped candid photos, which she would later place into an album marked our first Christmas together. The girls wrote letters to Santa. Will, full of warmth, helped them craft theirs with crayons and stickers, all while slipping in a few learning moments about spelling and kindness. Emily listened from the kitchen, a smile tugging at her lips. He was good with them, not performatively, not for show, but because he loved them. She saw it in the little things, how he knew Sophia needed an extra moment to warm up to new people, how he never corrected Madison's wild stories, but encouraged her imagination, how he always made sure Emily had time to breathe, stepping in without being asked. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, Will stayed behind to help with dishes. "I was thinking," he said, hesitating, "would it be okay if I spent Christmas morning here? I don't want to overstep." Emily paused, then nodded. "You're not overstepping. Your family." On Christmas Eve, the girls fell asleep in matching pajamas, clutching their favorite stuffed animals, with visions of Santa in their heads. Will and Emily stayed up assembling a wooden dollhouse, the one the girls had circled 3 times in the catalog. The instructions were cryptic, the parts endless, and laughter filled the room as they fumbled with screws and stickers. By 2 a.m., the dollhouse stood proudly by the tree. Will collapsed onto the couch with a groan. "I deserve a medal." Emily chuckled and handed him a cup of cocoa. "How about marshmallows instead?" They sat side by side, sipping slowly. Watching the snow fall outside the window, Will broke the silence. "You know, there are moments I forget they're not mine in the legal sense. It just feels like they always were." Emily turned to him. "They are yours, in the ways that matter." He looked at her, the glow of the fireplace reflecting in his eyes. "What about you?" She blinked, unsure of how to respond. Will leaned in, not to kiss her this time, but just to be close. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I need you to know. I never thought I'd feel at home again. Until you." Her breath caught. "You feel like home, too," she whispered. They didn't say anything more. They didn't have to. The girls woke up before sunrise, their excited footsteps thudding down the hallway like a stampede. Santa came. Sophia screamed. Emily and Will followed, groggy, barely managing to drink their coffee before the gift frenzy began. Squeals filled the apartment. The dollhouse was met with utter awe. Madison threw her arms around Will's neck. "You're the best papa in the world." He hugged her tightly, swallowing the emotion that threatened to spill over. Sophia ran to Emily. "Did Santa know I wanted the purple dragon book?" Later, they sat on the couch, buried in wrapping paper, hot cocoa mugs in hand. The girls snuggled between them in contented silence. I can't remember the last time I felt this at peace, Emily murmured. We'll look down at the girls, their heads resting on their laps. I've never felt it before. After breakfast, Emily brought out one last gift, small and wrapped in gold paper, tucked behind the tree. She handed it to Will. He opened it slowly. Inside was a framed picture of Rebecca holding the twins just moments after they were born. Her face was tired but radiant. The photo had been taken by a nurse. Emily had never shown it to anyone. She asked me to promise I'd raise them, Emily said softly. I kept that promise, but I think it's time they know the other half of who they are. Will stared at the photo, his eyes misting. He reached out and took Emily's hand. I promise to love them for the rest of my life. Emily smiled gently. You already do. That night, while the girls napped from the day's excitement, Emily and Will stood on the rooftop, bundled in coats and scarves. Snow drifted down softly. Will looked out at the city lights. I've been thinking. I don't want to be half-in anymore. I want to build something here. With you with them. Emily turned to him. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't proposing. He was offering presence, permanence, partnership. We've already started, she said. He reached for her gloved hand, lacing their fingers together. I never thought I'd get a second chance, he whispered. But this feels like the life I was always meant to live. Emily smiled through her tears. Me too. That Christmas didn't end with fireworks. It ended with quiet moments, whispered promises, and warmth shared in a home that had once only known grief. Madison and Sophia had fallen asleep in the fort they'd built in the living room. Emily and Will tucked them in together. Will kissed each girl's forehead. And then, as Emily dimmed the lights, Will kissed her. This time, with no hesitation. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about honoring the past while stepping boldly into the future. A family once formed by tragedy was now bound by love. 5 years had passed since that fateful promise in a hospital room. 5 years since Emily had gone from grieving widow to unexpected mother. And just over a year since Will had stepped into their lives, not as a disruptor, but as someone determined to stay. Will had restored what had been broken. Now their home was no longer haunted by loss. It was full of life, marked by the giggles of twin girls, the aroma of pancakes on weekends, the sounds of bedtime stories, and the rhythm of two hearts slowly learning how to beat together. But there was still one step left to make their family complete. It was a sunny April morning, the kind that made the city feel brand new. Emily was in the kitchen humming to herself while making French toast. Sophia sat at the island, sketching her version of a unicorn-cat hybrid. Madison was reading a chapter book she insisted was too grown-up for her sister. Will entered the room in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower, a small paper tucked in his back pocket. He kissed Emily on the cheek. Good morning, family. Madison looked up. Did you bring juice? Will grinned. Of course. He poured it, handed it out, and then sat, watching them with a quiet smile. He cleared his throat. So, I was wondering if I could ask all 3 of my girls something important. Emily turned, eyebrows raised. Your girls? He nodded. All of you. Later that day, they walked to their favorite garden, a place Will had made into a weekly tradition. It wasn't grand, just a quiet city spot with willow trees, benches, and wildflowers that always seemed to bloom ahead of schedule. The girls ran ahead, chasing butterflies. Will took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this moment for a while, he said. Emily turned, sensing the seriousness in his tone. He pulled the paper from his pocket and unfolded it. It was a form, filled out, signed, and official-looking. I'd like to adopt them, he said. Officially. Not just in the way we've lived, but in every sense of the law. I want them to know that I'm theirs, and they're mine. Always. Emily stared at him, blinking. They already know that. I know, he said gently. But I want it to be real on paper, too. For schools, doctors, their future. I want them to have my name, or any name you choose. I want to be their father in every way. Emily was silent for a long moment. Her voice finally broke through, shaky but full of emotion. You already are. Then she looked at him, truly looked at the man who had once been a ghost from her best friend's past, now the center of her world. You didn't have to fall in love with them, she whispered. But you did, and you didn't have to love me, either. But I did, Will said. And I do. The girls came running back with sticks and dandelions. Will knelt down on the grass, pulling them close. I have a big question for you, he said, his voice warm. You know how you call me Papa, right? They nodded, giggling. Well, How would you feel if we made it official? Like with papers and a judge and everything. So I could always be there for real? Sophia tilted her head. Like adoption? Exactly. Madison's eyes sparkled. Can we still keep Mommy's last name, too? Emily knelt beside them. Of course, you can have both, or choose your own. We can decide together. The girls launched into a dozen questions, each more creative than the last. Could they have 3 last names? Would it make him our forever papa? Could they wear fancy dresses to court? Will laughed, holding them tightly. Yes to all of it. A month later, in a small courtroom, filled with loved ones, Will stood with Emily and the girls, hand in hand. The judge, a kind older woman with a grandmotherly smile, looked down at the file. You filed for joint legal adoption of Madison Hart Davis and Sophia Hart Davis. And the girls understand what this means. Madison stepped forward proudly. He's already our dad. We just want to make it real. Sophia clung to her sister's side, nodding fiercely. The judge smiled. Then let me be the first to say congratulations. From this day forward, this is your forever family. Papers were signed, photos were taken, and when Will knelt down and held out 2 bracelets with their new hyphenated last names, Cole Hart Davis, the girls squealed and tackled him in a hug. That night, back at the apartment, they had a celebration. Balloons, sparkling juice, a playlist of the girls' favorite songs on repeat. Emily stood in the kitchen, watching Will twirl Madison while Sophia clung to his back like a koala. Rebecca's photo sat on the mantel, lit with a soft candle. Emily walked over and placed a fresh rose beside it. I kept my promise, she whispered. And for the first time in years, the ache in my chest wasn't grief. It was fullness. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Emily and Will sat on the couch under a shared blanket, their hands intertwined. Will looked over at her. Do you think they'll remember this? The court, the party, everything. Emily nodded. Maybe not every detail, but they'll remember how loved they felt. Will leaned over and kissed her slowly, deeply, not out of gratitude or relief, but out of pure, enduring love. Thank you for joining us in this heartwarming story of love, family, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How do you define family?